Welcome, guys. I saw some of you in the chat earlier. We are back, and we have a special guest down there. If you haven't seen the 1,000 advertisements and the subtle little hints,
here I am. I like that. I want to be introed like that on every podcast. I need
It's,
fireworks on every podcast I go on. That's amazing.
dude. I don't know where that is. That StreamYard that does that. Do you know?
I didn't know StreamYard did that. Like, I need to learn how to do that. You know something I don't know. That's awesome.
So you have to understand too.
It happened with Jason's name.
That's why I was in that
Bobby,
intro.
yeah.
So Bobby was high as a kite on edibles when that happened. So
good.
he lost his mind because he first did this.
Yeah, see,
and it made the heart.
It's not doing anything.
Yeah, like it doesn't do it for me for some reason, but he did this.
That's awesome. That's
and it literally, so he was talking about a bluegill, and he was like, the bluegill was this big, and it made hearts for the bluegill.
Oh,
yeah.
That's great. Oh,
so literally, I have no idea how to make it happen. It's only my guest that can do it for some reason.
Yeah.
Okay, it's trying to. It won't do it now, but then let's see. There's a heart. That's crazy.
Dude, no, that's literally why I did it. So you have to understand the beginning of that podcast, dude. So that was towards the end. He goes, "Oh shit, the edibles kicked in." And we're like, "No, that really happened, dude."
Well,
like
that happened. That was there. That really happened. Yeah, that's funny. That's great.
And honestly, guys, so back to the beginning of this video. This is why I had him on. He's probably the only other person that I've talked to on the internet that can rabbit hole more than me and PJ do. So I figured let's get the three of us together and see what happens. That's pretty much the strategy tonight. Also, I am going to be fishing the Susquehanna for the Kayak Adventure Series tournaments, and I needed to learn how to fish moving water, and I can't think of anybody better to ask questions like that than the guy who pretty much has an entire YouTube channel dedicated to it. So that's why we're here.
Let's do it.
The first question I had, and this is something that I'm going to hit you with early, is if you're fishing like a moving body of water, where do you start this? Like, what do you pick for? I know there's like structure, but is there specific type of structure that you look for? Because I know like with lakes, it's grass, but there's no grass in rivers.
So, I mean, that's kind of a loaded question, but also an easy question to answer first. I mean, so when I pick a moving body of water, like a river, a creek, a stream, whether it's man-made or it's, naturally flowing all the way out of a mountain somewhere, the first thing I'm concerned with is the current. Like, what is the current doing? Because the thing is like when you look at a river, you have so many different sorts of cover and structure and things that fish can get on. Rock, wood, grass, it's all in there. But the thing is what is the current doing in orientation to those things that's going to determine where the fish are going to be, right? So, like, I've fished a river and I've caught one off of a tree. And then the next one I caught off of a rock. And the next one I caught off of a, like a grass pile. Well, the thing is all of those had one common factor, which was what was the current doing around that piece of cover or structure or whatever it is. And so, yeah, I mean, like, and when I say that, it's well, then what are you looking for, Alex? I'm looking for eddies. I'm looking for, backflows. Okay. I'm looking for anywhere that the current breaks or anywhere that the current is doing something that would promote a fish wanting to sit there, And so, especially with bass, because bass, unlike other river current oriented fish, they're, like a trout, for example. And I learned this the other day on my podcast. We had a biologist on. Like, a trout is streamlined and designed to live in current. That's what they do. Like, their bodies literally, they can put forth almost zero effort and set in current that would literally knock us down. A bass, on the other hand, as optimized as they are for current, isn't like a trout in its, its anatomy, its body shape, the way its fins and its works. And then the second thing is they're ambush predators. And so a bass in particular is going to look for a spot where he can set idle and have things brought to its face. And when it comes by its face, it can just lash out and grab it and eat it. And so that happens in places where the river is going to eddy, where there's going to be a black backflow, where there's going to be a current break. That's where those fish are going to want to live and want to stay. Another thing that I'll look for is anywhere that we have like the transition in a river. So, when you're looking at a river, say it's the Susky, say it's one of these rivers around here, all rivers have shoals. And at the ends of those shoals, before you drop down to like the next level of that river, at the ends of those shoals, right before that water sucks off over whatever it is, the shoal or a waterfall or, whatever, there's going to be slack water there too. And I've seen times when I'm fishing a river that you will have a concentration of fish living right at the very ends of those areas before it dumps off into another area. And it's just because that water pushes, and it kind of gets to that area. And then that shoal breaks the current and it slows that water down enough that those fish that's like a natural stopping point for those fish to hang out and have things literally brought right to them. And all they got to do is sit there and eat. And so really
I've seen that on ponds too, like where the outlet on a pond is the same concept.
Exactly. And so when you ask the cover, what cover or structure am I looking for? Really not. I'm looking for what is the current doing? You know what I mean? And then we can get more specific. I mean, day to day, hour to hour, it could be like, oh, yeah, they're really concentrated on the big river rocks or whatever. But for the most part is figure the current out, you'll figure the fish out.
Okay. Yeah, because that's, for me, I fish mostly, I have big lakes and mostly ponds. So for me, it's more overhanging limbs. It's lily pads, grass mats, stuff like that. So that's not, you don't find a lot of big grass mats in river systems. They don't really live there because the grass is blown away by the river. So
and grass that you will find, like river grass and things like that, we call them like grass piles. So you'll find essentially it's like a sand bottom or a mud bottom, something where that grass can hang on, and you'll have just like an expanse of that grass, and it's river grass. And those fish will orient to that river grass just because it's somewhere for them to hide. But you're not going to find like matted vegetation like you would don't think of frog grass, think of like submerged river grass. It's a very different thing. It's very bladey. Like it's not where like lake grass is very bushy, river grass is it's like a blade of grass, and it's kind of literally it's like your grass in your yard. And they kind of hide down in there and just lay there and wait for stuff to come, and they'll come out and eat. So yeah,
that makes sense. When it comes to the other question I had is like, so what kind of finesse baits do you use in moving water? Because like a wacky rig isn't going to be necessarily as effective because it's just going to go downstream, or is it?
I'm surprised.
Okay.
I'll put it this way: 99% of the time, I'm gonna fish something moving, like because rivers and current make bass do the things we like for them to do. Like they want to eat something moving. Now that being said, I have seen times when you got to break something out to get them to eat otherwise. My favorite current fishing finesse tool is a Ned rig. An EWG style Ned rig. I pour my own with an EWG hook in it so that you're not getting hung up as much. But yeah, just an EWG style Ned rig with a little bit bigger plastic on it, because it's, for me, and what I've found is they want to eat something a little bit bigger. I don't know if it's just a visual thing and they are able to key in on it more, or what it is. But definitely a Ned rig. Now, the whole thing with a wacky rig is very interesting, because kind of like fly fishing, and we're about to get in some real geeky, like technical river stuff. I love this.
I'm down for it.
So like with fly fishing, a fly obviously is just going to get caught by the current and it's going to just go right down the river. But also, like with a fly, you're fishing the eddies, you're fishing the backwashes, you're doing things, and you're letting that current kind of dictate where that bait is going, but also trying to direct it in a direction to, maybe present it to a fish. So like with a wacky rig, I actually throw a wacky rig quite a bit in river current. And essentially what I'm doing is throwing it in there and letting the current take it, but also kind of directing it where I want to go, like you would a fly, like a submergent fly or something like that. And do the same thing with a fluke style bait, like any kind of like soft jerk bait, Texas rig that. You do the same thing with it. Like those are two of the most deadly tools in the river that a lot of people overlook, because they think, oh, I have to have something on the bottom, in this area. But you think about it, your spinner bait's in the column, your chatter bait's in the column, your big swim bait's in the column. All the things that you're going to throw that are moving are in the middle of the column. You can do the same thing with a soft jerk bait and a wacky rig and get a ton of bites. And a wacky rig, I actually don't wacky rig in the current just so that I don't get hung up a bunch of Texas rig weightless, like a General or something like that. But yeah, no, I kind of treat it almost like a fly, you know, throw it in there and just kind of let it drift and make multiple presentations. And eventually you'll just hit that right spot. And that smallmouth or largemouth will be like, yeah, I'll try to kill that. And they'll kill it.
That's a good point. Cause that's the thing I've always run into, like when I fish lakes a lot of times is when the wind starts blowing real hard, a lot of times I'll stop fishing a wacky and switch to a Ned because I'm like, the wacky's just getting moved off of the spot that I'm usually, because usually when I'm fishing a wacky rig, like on lakes and ponds, I'm fishing cover. I'm flipping it under, I'm casting under docks or up against cover. So then I'm like, if I cast, I have to like cast 30 yards above it so that it actually ends up where I want it to be. I don't want to deal with it. But when you use a Ned, do you upsize your weight on your Ned when you fish current versus like a pond or lake, or do you pretty much just throw the same you always would?
Well, it depends on the depth, right? Okay. You know, I mean, so like sometimes when I'm on a river, like I'm in half a foot of water, other times I'm in 15 foot of water, you know, it just depends. Yeah. But I usually use a 3/16 almost exclusively for everything. Right? I pour a lot of 3/16. Now, if I'm in like, you know, some of these spotted bass rivers we've got around here that the average depth is 2.5 feet, then that's when I'm on like a, you know, an 1/8 ounce or like a 16th, like really light, like get really, really light. And then it's just because even in there, like you talked to John about it, and John kind of actually taught me this. John Dalton, Creek Fishing Adventures, taught me this technique, which is drifting a Ned rig too. Because if you use a light Ned head, it's going to drop, but it's also never really, it's going to hit the bottom, but the current will move it. And so that's one of the reasons he has had such success and taught me this with the Hellgrammite, is that Hellgrammite being such a flat, wide piece of plastic, and then you use a light head, and you'll watch John do it, and I learned this from him, throw it up at the top of a current seam, and he'll just follow that thing all the way down because that flat plastic with that lighter head, it wants to fall, but the water also kind of grabs it, and so it kind of just carries it down current. I've actually got a video, I'll send it to you on Instagram, of me doing this in a river, cast it up around in front of this rock, and I'm just drifting that Hellgrammite down in front of it, and it got right where the fish was sitting, and it ate it. And so to answer the question in kind of two different ways, it depends. But the Ned rig can also be a tool to kind of feather through that current as well. I mean, dude, it's all current, and current. Yeah. I mean, like that is what will be the reoccurring factor here all night long. And really in all of my fishing, I mean, it was like today, the 4 fish that I caught when the wind got up and it started to create current and movement in the water. And it positioned fish. And like, that's why I love current so much, because it's the ultimate negator of any other effect. The sun's out, the moon's out, it's storming, it's raining, it's snowing. It doesn't matter. Those fish, if there's current, they have to orient to it and they have to use it to their advantage, or they just they won't succeed. So yeah.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that, because it's weird when you hear people say stuff and you're like, yeah, that I don't understand why I didn't think of that before, because like I have way more success even in my lakes when the wind's blowing, which is current. It's the same concept. It's not as fast, but at the end of the day, the water's moving, because like you said, I'm not, it's funny because my buddy will pick on me about it because I am not a finesse fisherman, but I will be when I need to be. But like, that's like the Hellgrammite, like that's literally something I discovered last year. A local company over in Massachusetts makes Fresh Baits, is a company that makes one that I got introduced to it from them because they're affiliated with the Jigs and Bigs podcasts, and I knew them from that, and I tried it because at their advice, and then I ended up buying the Helgi mold from Do It, and I make my own now, but because it's way cheaper and I can make whatever color I want. But you're right about the way that bait, even in a pond, the way the bait falls is different. So I did have PJ actually. Did you end up going? Were you going fishing the other day? I thought we were. Or no, you were going
camping.
Camping.
Yeah.
Fishing.
No, I wasn't going camping.
You're taking your Jeep out.
Taking a Jeep camping. Yep.
Give me 5 minutes here. All right. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're good.
Let me go take.
Good. Right. You're good. No worries. So for those of you guys who don't know, PJ has joined the Jeep family, and he now thinks he's a Jeep badass, and he's gonna start doing some camping and some. So are you doing like? And that's what I was gonna ask. Are you doing like the like, I'm taking this thing out in the middle of the freaking wilderness camping, or are you more or less going like
Absolutely.
just off the road a little bit and camping?
No,
No,
no.
you're
I'm
going like
going. I'm doing the full scale thing, dude. I got.
you're going to like, how the fuck did he get that car in there camping?
I'm going to do like the backwoods. Like I want to use my 4-wheel drive to get there. I want to set up. I want to be the only one around me.
Yep.
If there's a trout stream and or any stream, I want to be able to hit that. So yeah, dude.
Yep.
Like I go down. I mean, I got the burner where I can make my own food. I got the 0 degree sleeping bag right there.
Nice.
I've got a couple of mats that I put in there. The first
How
time.
tall are you?
I'm 5'9".
Okay, so you're not bad. You're not bad. It's tight, but you're not bad.
It's tight. My Jeep is actually from like where my head is to where my feet is 5'6". So 3 inches. But I mean, if you bend your knees a little wee bit,
you can make it work. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not. And actually, I lay with my head on like the passenger side and my feet on the driver's side. So it was good.
I'm 6 foot and I slept in the back seat of an F-150, so I fully understand what you
mean. I mean, it's definitely doable. I'm actually heading back to Pennsylvania next weekend to do a few things. And while I'm back here, I'm going to be back. I'm going to leave Friday after work. I'll be back here Saturday, Sunday, come home on Monday, and I will be Jeep camping the entire time.
For you, that kind of makes sense too, though, because like the whole like fly fishing thing, like you could get right up in there, set yourself up on a stream bed somewhere, fish your ass off, and then go like, because like I will say, this is something that's it's not even in the same spectrum, but it's, dude, when I went to Boston for that Celtics game and I had to walk a mile to get to the stadium, dude, I was fucking exhausted. Right. And you're like literally walking up and down streams with waders on to catch fish. So being able to like go take a nap before you have to go home would be kind of nice. I'm not going to lie. Because there's some days when I've been fishing all day where I'm like, I don't know. Like I was watching Alex's video when he was fishing that city deal. And I was like, I'm not built for that. Like, I'm not built for all that walking. I'm going to have to get in shape in order to start doing some of this trout crap because...
Oh, wait till you go to the Susky and you got to get out and pull that kayak around. That's I'm telling you, bro.
Dude. And the thing is, it's a freaking old town, so it's like, 80 pounds. The only good thing is it's solid plastic and you're never really going to crack that thing, but you pay for it with the weight of that thing too. So.
Oh yeah. No, that's one thing about river fishing. I tell a lot of people, depending on the river that you're in, I got a few that I can float in the PA and I'm good. But then there's others that we take the shoaly and there's a whole lot of pulling and jerking and moving and grooving and going over logs and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's fun though.
It's funny because you actually, I was going to show you this, and you're actually to blame for a lot of people making purchases.
I know.
So Tweezy said that.
My man.
Which, to be fair, as you see back there, there's one of those boxes that's got about 3-4 of the money badgers in it.
Oh yeah, look at here.
But also, you made me want a shoaly.
That was from today. Yeah. So there you go.
Yep, dude, that thing is crazy.
Yeah,
you made me want one of those shoalies just because there's Otter Creek, which is right next to my house, and it's one of those places where the state decided that they're no longer going to clear log jams. They're just not doing it.
Okay, yeah.
So there's places where it's 20 feet deep and there's pools and there's like 40-inch pike, there's trout, there's bass, there's smallmouth, largemouth, every species you can name, right?
Yeah.
But there's log jams and there's places where you've got to get out and go up on the bank and get around it. I'm not dragging my old town up on a bank and running water. To get around a log jam. Whereas if I had one of those like Hobie has that little paddleboard thing too, that might not be bad. Yeah. But I don't know about that because I weigh 340 pounds and I'm pretty sure I'm probably pushing the weight limit on that thing to begin with.
Yeah.
And that shoaly, I mean, I've seen, if you want an endorsement for that kayak, watch just what Alex puts in his videos, the abuse he puts that thing through. Because I'm watching the videos and I'm like, holy crap, like what does he do? Like, I've literally watched you, like, you're dragging this thing up over a shoreline or a bank, and I'm just like,
Yeah.
but I mean, it takes it, dude. It's
Dude, that
crazy.
kayak. I will say I don't work with with Crescent in any way. But that kayak is probably my favorite kayak that I have, and it is the toughest thing that I've ever owned as far as like a piece of equipment to do something
Yep.
with. I mean, that thing, I have dropped it. I dropped it one time 10 feet off of a bridge down onto rocks, and I thought if it's gonna be done in, this will do it in.
Yep, that's gonna do
I
it.
got down there and it hadn't even phased it. And I was like, this is the greatest thing ever.
Yep.
Like I've drug it over barbed wire. I've done concrete, asphalt, rocks, wood. I mean, you name it. I've tried to break it and I cannot break it. I slid down the hill the other day when it snowed at the house, jumped out of it. It went on down my driveway and hopped the road and hit the neighbor's house and still didn't break. And so there you go. I mean, it's the ultimate. It's just, I can't break it, dude. I love that kayak.
Tell me you got that on video, at least for a short.
Dude, I almost had it on video and the GoPro died because I'd done it like 3 or 4 times and bailed out. Cause you got to understand, like I live on the side of a mountain. I own 16 and a half acres and literally 14 of it is straight up a hill to the top of a ridge. And so my house kind of sits back up on a hill. And so my driveway is like a 45-degree angle driveway. I mean, it's straight down. And so we're going from the hill behind my house down into the driveway and then bailing before we go down the rest of the driveway. Well, I bailed one time and reached for the kayak and just missed it. And there went the kayak. And it went down the driveway, hit the road. And the best part is you hear it goes, oof. And I was like, oh, crap. So I had to go tell on myself to the neighbor and go over there and be like I was a teenager again, be like, hi, ma'am, I broke your stuff. And like, it was pretty good.
That is ridiculous. That's literally the main reason why I probably gravitated to your channel the most, is that you're just literally a redneck out there having fun at all times. And
yeah,
like,
I'm a child.
That's literally the crap I would do. Like, I actually said that to my buddies. We're talking about going ice fishing, right? And I was like, dude, there's not enough ice. Like, unfortunately, it's been like 32, 32, 50, 50, 32, 45, 32. So we get like this shitty ice. And I'm like, do you guys think if we took kayaks and just went out and then just drilled holes from our kayaks, that way if the ice breaks, we're just sitting in a kayak at that point.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, but it's gonna be so much work. And I'm like, yeah, but think about how safe it would be. We just use our paddles, just push ourselves along, and then worst case scenario, we're just floating in our kayak. And they're like, no. And I'm like, come on, it might work.
Let's do it. Yeah, that's awesome. Y'all have had better weather than we have. Like, it's been so cold down here. Like, it's been kind of incredibly cold. I don't remember. I don't personally. Like I said, I was born in 93 and I was born after the blizzard of 93. So I had never seen as much snow as we got the other day. And we got a foot at my house. And like, then it got down. So it snowed a foot and then it got into the negatives. And it was like -4, -6, -2, -8. And I'm like, literally, I've never seen weather like this in my life. And these poor fish, that's what I tell everyone. I was talking about it in a video.
I can't imagine. Yeah.
Well, these fish, like your guys' fish are used to the cold. And so they're used to like they're literally generations and generations of fish are used to that ice. They're used to that cold. Yep. Our fish, man, like my buddy Caleb, he guides down on Chicken, man. He said bait fish, bass, like he's seen so many big bass floating dead. And he's like, it's just where they're physically not used to it. Yeah, and when it got that cold, it just killed them, so yeah, it's crazy.
Well, that's the thing about being cold-blooded is they're cold-blooded and then they haven't had to adapt like our fish do. Like literally we'll have days here where, like last year in Ice Out, like I went to a lake on Sunday, checked the ice, and it was locked up ice. On Wednesday, I was fishing it.
That's crazy.
So you think about how drastic of a temperature change that had to go through.
Yeah.
And I caught my PB the following Saturday.
Yeah.
And then I didn't catch crap there for 2 weeks. And then it froze again.
Yeah.
So, like, our fish are just... And that's the thing is actually the biologists, like, kind of talk about that when I was on May Contain about how, like, the growing season and all that for our fish is like our fish also, like, to be honest, to my advantage, get dumber because they don't see baits for 6 months.
Yeah.
So like I can go out in April and throw a bait that wasn't catching on towards the end of last year, and they'll start nailing it again because they completely forgot that this is danger.
Yeah. It's
So
like,
that's the only benefit.
I think it's like 6 weeks. In like 6 weeks, a bass will completely forget what it knows, or what it's knows is not the right way. It's what it's instinctually, like imprinted on its brain. But like 6 weeks, they said they're kind of done. But they do learn from repetitive exposure. So like even though they'll forget certain things over repetitive exposure, it'll be imprinted forever. And then they're showing now that through repetitive exposure that it can be then passed on to their young as well.
Genetic memory,
The genetic memory, and then it becomes like instinctual to avoid certain things. And like they said, that's probably what happened like with the Alabama rig. It's probably what happened with, certain baits. And that's why you'll see like these ebbs and flows of bait use is because, like it will go a long time where it's like, oh, that doesn't work anymore. And then somebody will pick it up and start using it again. And it's just the bass have for a generation or two not seen it and then react to it a certain way. So
that's me with the size 4 Fire Tiger Mep spinner in the spring.
Oh yeah,
because no one freaking fishes. They fish them for trout, but they fish like the size 2s, size 1s, like the little ones.
Yeah.
And I go out and I use those in the spring for spawning bass because no one uses them for bat. No one uses them out deep. They're using them shallow for trout. Yeah. And I have a couple of lakes around me that like I literally will smoke, and they'll be like, "What are you using?" And I'm like, "A Meps," and they're like, "You're not. No." Like, what do you mean? What are you were using? I'm like, literally a freaking little tiny inline spinner, rooster tail, whatever brand you want to buy.
Yeah.
And it's because, like you said, it's because people forgot about them. I tell people that all the time. I'm like, don't sleep on the old school baits because the fish forget about them. And that actually makes sense from the genetic memory standpoint. Is it's been a couple of generations since they've had to know that that's a threat, so they don't know it's a threat anymore. They forgot about it, basically.
Exactly. People still don't believe I catch them on a Blaze Money Badger. So I literally have people look at me and go like, what are you really catching them on? I'm like, but I don't know how many more fish I got to put on the internet with that thing in the back of their throat. Like, it's that bait. It's that Blaze Money Badger. It's that specific one. So, yeah.
Well, and that's the thing is that's something that I think people get. I will say there's something about that Money Badger because I've caught fish on the perch one. I've caught fish on a couple of the other colors. But also, I personally think sometimes it's not even necessarily the color. I think there's some sort of like, it sounds like some sort of like juju, but like I think your confidence sometimes transmits down that line and how you fish it. And you've caught so many fish on that now that you know exactly how to use it, when to use it. It's now a confidence bait. So like because I've literally handed people the bait I was catching on. Mm-hmm. I've handed guys my rod and been like, cast this there. And they don't catch a fish. And then I'm like, watch. And then catch a fish. Like, it's not it's a technique.
Well, and I think sometimes I do things unconsciously while cranking a crankbait that I don't even notice that in review of video. Like, so I put out that video with my buddy Michael, is the Money Badger versus Rock Crawler video. And watching myself fish that bait, like I realized like I do things unconsciously. Like there's like this little hiccup in my reel. And like I didn't even realize that I would do it. And it's like where I don't even know. Like, I guess I've taught myself to do this and not even known that I was teaching myself to do it. Where like I'm reeling, and when I get to the like pinnacle of the rotation of the reel, I kind of like hiccup it, and I'm like, and don't even realize I'm doing it. It's, that's making that bait do something down there, because that badger was created to deflect really well. Well, if you impart any sort of action, a twitch or like a little quick, that badger will track off.
Yeah.
And so it may be something to do with that. You know what I mean? It's fascinating. But I say that and then, I can go flip against some of the best flippers in the whole entire world and catch fish. So I don't know. Maybe there's something there too. I'm doing unconsciously on how I flip, where I flip, what I'm looking for. And that's really the hardest thing. Like when you ask me questions, like the current thing, like I can explain to you why it works, but then actually like put you there and go, okay, fish down this bank. But like I'm doing things like unconsciously, subconsciously as I'm fishing, where I'm looking, I'm going, there should be a fish sitting there, and it's because this looks like this or that, but I've seen it 1,000 times before, and I fish it. You know what I mean? But it's interesting. Like buzzbait. Buzzbait's a great example. I literally walked my buddy Josh through catching a fish on a buzzbait. And it's because I had subconsciously figured out that those fish were like, it was a deal where they wanted a buzzbait, but they wanted it where it was just barely working. You know what I mean? Like where you would throw it in there and just barely work it right under the surface, like just enough to kind of gargle that thing. And Josh was trying to mimic my reel speed, not knowing that I had a 10 gear ratio reel and he was fishing a 7 gear ratio reel. So he's reeling it just fast enough where they were missing and he wasn't getting bites. And I was literally fishing behind him, just cleaning up after him. And I was like, okay, wait a second. I was like, what gear ratio are you throwing? He's like, it's 7. I was like, oh, duh. I was like, slow down a little bit, dude. I was like, you're fishing that thing way too fast. He's like, well, I was like, yeah. I was like, because I'm fishing 10 gear ratios, it's different. And dude, it was just, I don't know. It's funny. It's funny. Those little things like that I think it's confidence. I think it's instinctual. I think it's subconscious. I think it's just like when we say people are fishy, that's something I like to say a lot. Like that guy's fishy. He just catches a lot of fish. I think that he's just spent a tremendous amount of time doing a lot of different things, and he's just really good at a lot of different things. You know what I mean? So,
yeah, it's funny because I learned what you're saying. When you do content, you realize crap. You don't even think about. You learn, to be honest, I tell people all the time, like, even if you have no intentions of ever putting the video on YouTube or anywhere,
just watch.
Take a GoPro, point it at you, and go fishing. Because you don't know how many times, because I've started like hardcore documenting stuff too. I've gotten to the point where I've got like an Excel sheet, and now when I get home, and I honestly, the filming helps because then I can watch my video while I'm editing and go, okay, I caught this on this and this and that. But what happens is you go home and you say, your wife says, how'd you do? And you go, oh, I caught a bunch on a black and blue wacky rig. Then you go watch your footage. It was a June bug. You changed halfway through the day to a different bait. You completely forgot that you'd swapped the bait, or you had a June bug in your black and blue bag and put that on and didn't actually think about it. And then you go back and watch that video and you go, oh shit, that wasn't even the bait I thought I was throwing.
Exactly.
Or like you said, I had one time where like the thing I noticed the most, it'll be like tracking like a crankbait, anything with like an actual steady retrieve. Like you thought you were doing like a steady retrieve, but you stopped to itch your face. And that's when you got hit.
Yeah, that was.
And you don't think about that. You don't realize it. You're like, oh, itch my face, fish on. Oh, I must have been reeling the whole time, but it was that stop that caused that bait to blow out that made that fish bite.
Yeah, I did that in a tournament not too long ago. It was really cold, and I was like stopping to wipe my nose is what it was. I'd be reeling. I'd be like, yeah. And like people are like, hey, I don't know if you noticed this, but every time that you wiped your nose, you caught a fish. And retrospectively is when I noticed it. And it's like, oh, a little stop and go retrieve.
Yeah, you don't make that connection until after you. And that's why I say, like, watching the footage, sometimes you realize like just little things. And that's honestly where, when you get into the technical side of bass fishing, like people ask me all the time, like, especially because when you're in a kayak, especially, it looks ridiculous. I'll admit it. I carry 9 rods in my kayak. Like, and people are like, why do you need all them rods? That's a common statement, you know. It's like, what do you need all them rods for? And I'm like, well, this one's for that, and this one's for that. And I'm trying to explain it, and I'm like thinking, they don't understand the difference between a 10-speed reel and a 7-speed reel.
Yeah.
And I'm like, there's literally a reason for it, but when you start out, you don't know any of those nuances. Like simple things like a moderate action rod when you're fishing a treble hook so that you don't rip their face apart when you set the hook. Like there's little things like that you can learn to do, but until you know all the little details. And honestly, I've had a lot of times where, again, I thought I caught a fish with a different rod entirely. Where I broke it off and said screw it and just tied on a different bait, but I don't normally use that rod for chatterbaits and didn't realize that somehow that one made the difference. So it's
that's cool. But, yeah, no, dude, that's bass fishing too. Bass fishing is a weird aspect of fishing because you got trout dudes, you got saltwater dudes. Like it's like my buddy Judd who he guides for redfish. Dude, he's got like 26-foot spinning rods with 2,500 size reels on them with 20-pound braid to 20-pound leaders, and literally he puts 2 in the boat with him. So if they break one, he can just tie the other one up, and that's all he uses. That's literally it. And I mean, they fish for speckled trout, redfish. I mean, everything that swims out there. I mean, like when I caught my biggest drum, my biggest red drum, it was like 41 inches long. It was huge. I mean, it was the biggest fish I've ever caught in my life. I caught it on a 7-foot medium spinning rod with a 300 size reel. And I mean, that's just what them boys use. You know what I mean? But yeah, you're right. Bass fishing is very particular. Like we are very particular. You can do a lot. I mean, I hate to be that way. Like, because a lot of people think, well, then it's this big barrier to entry to get in. Like we got to have all this specific stuff. No, you can bass fish really easy. I mean, if you got a 7-foot medium heavy rod and, you know, some mono and a 7-gear ratio, where you can do all kinds of stuff, catch all kinds of fish. But when you get really into it and like you start to, it's like playing golf. You know, you got your basic set of clubs, but then, you know, you might get you a sand wedge. Yeah, you can get out of the sand with, you know, a normal iron, but you want a sand wedge so that you've got that specific tool for that job. That's bass fishing. So
that's, I think, the biggest thing that's actually one of the main reasons why I started doing like a lot of education, because bass fishing is what you make it. You could go bass fishing. Like my dad is the funny, like when my dad goes fishing with me, it makes me laugh every time because I go out there with 8 rods. He's probably got 5 or 6.
Yeah.
I've got a square bill. I've got a chatterbait. I've got a wacky rig, a jig, right?
Yeah.
He's got a black blue worm, a blue black laminate, a green worm. He's got 3 fucking Texas rigs. Of the 5 rods, 3 are just 3 different colored Texas rig worms.
I love it. I love it.
And he'll catch them right next to me, and I'm throwing, you know, $200 worth more of tackle than he is, and he's still like, I got one, and I'm like, I don't understand.
Yeah.
But it's all what you make it. So like he doesn't care about having all these moving baits. He just likes to use a worm and go work a log until a fish bites it. And I'm gonna do that if I don't get bites, but I also enjoy, you know, having a money badger get slammed, you know, T-boned by a bass. It's just a whole different way of fishing.
Well, and two, I think it's how much do you want to optimize what you're doing, right? You know, I think like speaking of river fishing, and so we got on a really good bladed jig bite. Like they were absolutely smoking a slobber knocker, right? I have a very specific rod and reel that I throw that slobber knocker on, right? You know, it's a moderate action rod. It's made for bladed jigs, 6-gear ratio reel, very specific line, you know, all that kind of stuff. The thing is where that really counts is like when you do hook a 5.5 pounder. And when all of the little details have to be just right and the stars have to align to be able to get that fish into the boat, especially when you're in a piece of plastic floating down a river at it and you've hooked it and it's hung up in a tree. Like, and that happened to me this year. And, you know, and so it's like, if I hadn't had all my little tools specifically the way that I wanted them and everything was optimized as much as it could be, and that I knew every factor under my control was under my control, that fish probably doesn't come in the boat. And like, that's where a lot of people like, you know, when you see somebody lose a big one, like an 8, 9, 10 pounder, a lot of the times it wasn't something that the fish did. It was that you just didn't have all the little pieces exactly how they should have been to get that fish in the boat. And it's not your fault. It's just, it's the way it is. You know what I mean? And so like I think we've been driven by a culture where it's very competitive. You know, everything within the fishing industry is driven by competitive bass fishing, which is a fascinating thing because 90% of the people just fish on the bank and want to have fun. But like, that's why we have such a drive to have such specifications and like specific things when it comes to certain baits, is because they're looking at it going, hey, $100,000 is on the line. So if all this shit ain't just right, then I may not get $100,000, and then that gets passed down to us, which is cool. But then it also drives this giant industry of people buying $400 and $500 rods and reels and specific line and sharpening these hooks and this and that and that. I mean, and I can go down it quite a bit. I mean, like I've gone down the rabbit hole on gear. I have very specific gear for certain baits. I mean, but then other stuff, I'm just like, hell, far, give me the damn $99 rod and the $50 reel, and let's go to work. You know, like it just depends on what it is and what we're doing and how specific and weird I get about it.
I think that's how I think so. I have ADD, and I think that's why I've stuck with fishing. I used to play baseball in high school. I played beer gut softball for a long time. Yeah. Eventually, I got bored with even video games. I got bored with like everything, right?
Yeah.
But fishing, I haven't, and it's because I can learn a new technique, or I can
Yep.
learn how to use a different style rod, or like, to be honest, I keep telling PJ in just about every single podcast that I refuse to get into fly fishing because I can't afford it.
Yeah.
Not because I don't want to,
Yeah.
but because it's an entire another rabbit hole of what weight rods do I need? How many fly? I gotta buy my own now because I'm competitive. I'm gonna have to buy my own fly tying set because I gotta
Yeah.
tie my own flies because
Yeah.
that's just how my brain works. I refuse to get into fly fishing, but at the same time, like I've been like, but it does kind of look like fun to go catch a fish on that weird rod and try to learn how to cast it. Like,
Yeah. Well, that's anecdotal, dude. Fishing is the most anecdotal activity or recreation that exists. I mean, I think the only thing that rivals it is hunting. And because, you know,
Yep.
you have all the different kinds of hunting you can do. I mean, that's why you see people out here trying to kill a deer with a spear. I mean, because if it's allowed, people are going to try to do it.
try it. Yeah.
But like, that's the weird thing about like outdoor recreation as far as like hunting and fishing goes, is it is so anecdotal. It can be as simple as a cane pole, a bobber, and a worm, or it can be as complicated as $100,000 bass boat and enough electronics to shut down the power grid. You know, and it can be as simple as $50 rods and reels, or it can be as expensive as, literally, I saw there was I think it was Dye was putting out like a $2,000 reel here soon. I mean, and it's so, you know, and then fly fishing, it's its own damn animal. I mean, like,
Yeah.
you know, and even then, I mean, like, you've got purists who want to go just, you know, fish native fish, and, you know, they only use certain kinds of flies and barbless hooks and all. And then you got dudes like me who are just out there with a spinner and a little bitty, you know, spinning rod, and we're just going to catch fish. I mean, it's this anecdotal, beautiful thing. You know what I mean? That I think it's what I love about fishing. It's also what kind of is so divisive in fishing, but it's also, I think, what is so cool about fishing is that it is so anecdotal to what we want to do. You know what I mean? So it's really cool. I like baseball. I mean, there's one way to play baseball. It's it. There's one way to play football. There's one way to play soccer. There's one way to race cars. Yeah, there's different kinds of car racing, but for the most part, you go forward until you run out of laps, or you've gone point A to point B. I mean, like with fishing, do it any way you want to do fishing as long as it's legal.
Well, yeah, I mean, go on YouTube. I mean, honestly, not even trying to plug your channel, but like go on your channel. One day you're in a bass boat. The next day you're walking in the city with a rod and reel that anybody could pick up at Walmart. And then the next day you're in a $4,000 kayak going down a river chasing someone else trying to catch smallmouth. Like, that's what's cool about it, is you can do it 100 different ways.
Yeah, and I enjoy it all. See, I mean, like, boys, if it swims and it's got gills and it breathes through water, I want to try to catch it. I mean, like, I love, and that's where I'm like, this year I'm really going to kind of just enjoy everything. You know, I've always been a bass fisherman. This is the way it is. I love bass fishing. I'm always going to chase bass. You know, it's what Dad brought me up on. But it's one of those things, like, Dad was also a consummate outdoorsman, and like, you know, if the striper were biting, we go catch striper. You know, I love to tell this story. We were staying at a resort one time in Florida, and in the middle of the resort was a putt-putt course, and you could win a free round of putt-putt if you caught the biggest tilapia. Okay, so me and my dad go down there and start devising a plan. How are we going to catch the biggest tilapia, because we want a free round of putt-putt? So Dad figured it out that if we took the dog food, you know, because they feed them like fish food, dog food, like the brown pellets, we'd soak the brown pellets in a cup of water till they just got soft enough that we could run a hook through them. By the time we left that damn place, we were handing out free putt-putt cards because we had caught so many damn big tilapia. We just kept beating our own record. I mean, we were slamming tilapia. And it's just because, dude, we love catching fish. I mean, we figured it, like, and that's like the weird, like, people, someone commented on my trout fishing video. They're like, man, you picked that up really fast. And I was like, it's like, that's because what we've always done. Like, if we can figure it out, we will obsess over it until, like, I get it just right. And then, like, then it's like, okay, I did that. Let's go on to this next thing, you know, or just keep repeating that process. Like, I love it.
And to be fair, YouTube also does a little bit of justice, because what you didn't see is the first 3 hours or 4 hours that he was not catching something, but also
the first like hour and a half where I'm walking around like, I don't know what to do. I don't know where they live. And then the guy walked up. He's like, do you see him right there? And I was like, oh, okay. And then it was like game on after that. Yeah.
Dude, so you actually kind of opened my eyes to that too, is I've thought about that a lot. Is like, I've seen a lot of people like fishing in areas, and I'm like looking at it like, how the hell are they catching anything? There's not enough water there. But then, like, when you did that video, like, I literally paused your video and was like, on the camera, and I was like, oh yeah, okay. Now that I could kind of see there's something there, I would have known there was a fish there if you hadn't pointed it out, and it made sense. Like that's something that I've got to learn. Like I got to change my mentality as mostly bass fishing. But I also grew up. See, I didn't grow up bass fishing at all. I've only been bass fishing for 3 years.
Okay. Yeah.
I started out. My dad's big thing was trolling for salmon on like Champlain. So we would do the downrigger, dipsy diver, going out and doing the more, I guess you'd call it deep sea, but it's just basically trolling with, spoons and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And we used to go to Lake Ontario and catch, king salmon, catch 30-pound salmon. And I got into bass fishing, honestly, because it was more accessible. I can buy a plastic boat for a few $100s and a spinning rod, and I can go catch these fish. And these fish live in ponds and golf course ponds and storm drains, and I can go. They're more accessible. And then, but I grew up more doing that kind of stuff, but I never learned how to like bank. I never knew how to target fish from the bank.
Yeah.
I always just went to the bank with bobber and worms, a couple spinners.
Yeah.
Sat there in a camp chair, casted, and hoped they caught something. I was never like specifically targeting trout or specifically targeting bluegill. It was like, oh, I caught 5 species today and I went home. And then I started doing more and more fishing, and I learned that, like, honestly, part of it, I was telling PJ before you jumped on the channel, is part of my motivation for learning all these different species is I'm a small YouTube channel and I want to try to appeal to more people too. Because I want to learn so I can teach you. And like you were saying, like, you don't realize how much obsession you have until you start a hobby like fishing. And like I was talking to my buddy about going ice fishing, right? And I was literally talking shit about ice fishing, how it's pretty much just shit luck. You drill a hole and hope there's fish under it. It's really hard to find structure when you're looking at a sheet of white. There's no way to tell what's under you. But I was literally on Navionics looking at depth chart maps, going, there's a weed bed here. There's deep water access. There's an inside turn. So they're probably here because they would pull off of this, and and I'm doing all this like technical troubleshooting to go ice fishing for an hour. And you start doing all this like weird processing in your head, and then when you add YouTube on it, that adds a whole nother level, because then you're like, I want to make content. So the desire to make a video that's appealing to other people adds this whole other level of obsession, because you're like, okay, now I've got to learn it. And learn it enough so that somebody's not going to roast me in the comments like, you're a fucking idiot. That's not how you do any of this.
I'll bring it on. I don't care. Like that's
I love it.
I love when I do something brand new and they're like, well, you did it the wrong way. I'm like, but I caught fish. But they're like, you did it the wrong way. I'm like, is there a right way? And I'm like, I caught fish. That's all that matters. Like, that was the trout thing. Like somebody commented, I did something wrong, and I was like, I caught fish. That's all that matters to me. Like that's the anecdotal part. Like. And that's the crazy part is like, as long as like, it's my buddy John. So like, John, his entire fishing life has been like a multi-species dude. Like, I mean, he'll catch a white bass, a crappie, and a sunfish. Like the first 4 or 5 times me and John went fishing, it went a lot like this. He texts me, he says, hey, I wore him out on this creek. And I go fishing with him, and he's wearing out sunfish and redbreast and trout and all that. And I'm over here, I'm like, John, where's the bass at? And he's like, oh, no, like, you got to do this. He's like, did you not? I'm like, no, John, I brought a slobber knocker, a crankbait, and a 9-inch swim bait. I didn't bring anything to catch sunfish with, and so it's just funny, like, but that's the way he likes to fish. And like, me and Josh make fun of him all the time because we'll be fishing and he'll just like he'll bring some, 5, 6, extra light spinning rod with him. And me and Josh will be trying to catch a bass this long, and he's over just hammering the shit out of warmouth. You know what I mean? And he's having a ball, and that's what he loves. And I'm just like, I love that John loves it. Like, it's just, there's nothing like John getting giddy and giggling behind me and Josh while we're not catching nothing. And he's just cracking some sort of sunfish or something.
I got a buddy that he actually picks on me because so he's a YouTube guy too, and he does like, he fishes everywhere. He lives in Montreal, so he does like a lot of like the like canal overflow fishing stuff up there. Then he comes down to Vermont and fishes with me. But he gets so excited over any fish.
Yeah.
It could be a 6-inch perch, and I pick on him every time, and I'm actually gonna like literally. He'll be like, "Guys, okay, guys, this is a 6-inch yellow perch. Oh my god, guys, you should look at like you would think it's the first perch he's ever seen in his life." And then of course I'm like, "Yeah, guys, look at this 30-inch pike," and I'm like,
Yeah.
and I don't think about the fact that like to somebody that's like the biggest fish they've ever seen.
Mhm. Oh yeah.
And like that's the thing is that's what's cool about fishing is that there's people that only catch crappie and love catching crappie and will catch 100 and still love every one of them.
Exactly.
And then there's people that only do this or that, and then
Yep.
there's guys like PJ that bought a Jeep so he can go fly fishing and off roading and
Love it.
But see, I think if you don't get excited over the little 6-inch fish, you're never going to get excited about the 30-inch fish.
Exactly.
You got to have the excitement
Yep.
about them all. No matter what species it is, too. You know what I mean? You got to get that excited about it. That's why you're there.
Yeah, and you got to love
That's
the
my
process
problem.
too. You got to love the
Yep.
process of doing it. Like so many people look at fishing, and I put out a video tonight. I'm going to put out a couple more videos that like I'm just not catching fish, like straight up. Like I catch 1, 2 maybe, and it's like I'm just expressing to people like, hey, it's a process, and you got to enjoy the process because the process leads to catching fish. And then
Yep.
there's going to be days that you wreck them, and there's going to be days you don't wreck them. And like as long as you enjoy, because I just love being outside. Like the fish is just a bonus. Like the fish,
Mhm.
like, and I love that too. Like you said, like those trout, dude. Like catching those trout, they're beautiful. I mean, those are just immaculate creatures.
Mhm.
And it's like I was excited about every single one of them because I'm just like, look how pretty this is. This is like
Yep.
really pretty fish. And it's just, yeah, you're right, man. Like I think the day that it doesn't excite me is the day that I hang it all up and buy golf clubs. You know what I mean? Like
Exactly.
So tell me, man. I'm wanting to learn a little bit about fly fishing.
Oh, boy.
I'm about to dive into it. I think I'm going to get my first fly rod, and I'm going to do the whole thing. Right? What
Okay.
is what's your basic setup? Like if you were to look at me and and say, give me some tips, like how do you pick your kind of first fly rod that's a good general, go out and do a little bit of everything with it?
It depends. I would go with definitely a 5-6 weight.
Okay.
That'd be like you can fish for trout as small as you want, but then you can fish. You can actually catch bass on a 5-6 weight
Okay. Cool.
fly rod too.
Yeah.
So I definitely go with a 5-6 as a starter.
Yeah.
Depending on your
5-6, that's not length. That's just the weight of the
that's
rod.
just the weight. Yeah, I would go 5-6. I would probably, depending on what you're fishing for, I would go like a 9 to 10 foot lengthwise, somewhere in that range.
Okay.
And there's Orvis is the big name. You're going to spend a lot of money. Echo is a really, I don't want to say cheaper brand because they have some expensive rods too, but you could get a nice Echo rod. I own 3 of them.
Okay.
So you can get a nice Echo rod reel combo set up, and then you can get into it that way right there. It'd be a nice setup for you right there.
Cool.
And like I said, you can chase anything. Bass, trout of any size.
Yeah. And then what about reels? Like for like the fly reel itself, like what's a good starter fly reel?
I would definitely go like I said, if you're going to go with an Echo or with an Orvis, see which one is going to, I go with, because it'll be a 5-6 weight, and then it'll be a 5-6 weight reel that you'll put with it.
Gotcha. Okay.
And so you'll match those up right there.
Okay.
And then it all depends on, like what style, if you're going to, trout fish, things like that there. If you're going to Euro nymph, if you're going to nymph, you know what I mean? So all that there stuff comes into play.
Gotcha.
But I mean, I would definitely go to a shop.
Gotcha.
And not don't go to a big box store. Don't go to Cabela's or Bass Pro or Gander Mountain or, I'm not saying they're bad, you know what I mean? But you go to a fly shop and you'll be able to, sit down and talk to somebody and say, look, I'm just getting into this.
Yeah.
I'm looking to target, trout or bass I I got a freaking 9 weight now. You know what I mean? For different things. So I mean, it's all, it depends on what you want to do.
Gotcha.
It's a whole other animal, a whole other rabbit hole that you're about to go down.
I love it.
It's going to be a good experience.
Yeah. No, I love it. I love it too because Pure Fishing has they've got Grays and Hardy, and then Fenwick makes some fly stuff, and so I can't wait. Like I've been talking to all the guys over there, like what do I need? What do I need to do? And like it's kind of the same thing that you were telling me, but like they all told me too, like go to a shop. Like, you know, we'll send you the gear, but then go to a shop and like let them just show you. You know what I mean? Like, because they really want to teach. And I was like, that's a really cool culture. You know what I mean? Because you don't see that in bass fishing a lot of like people wanting to like let people in on the secrets. But it feels like with fly fishing, outside of the spots, they really want to help you with the gear. Like it feels very gear driven and gear centric, which is really cool. So I'm excited to get into it. I can't wait to. I mean, it's definitely not going to take over everything that I do, but it's going to be integrated into what I do. Because I got a feeling there could be some situations where having a fly rod on a boat or a kayak during a tournament or something where you could probably catch some fish that other people would never even imagine fishing for because you could present them something they don't normally see.
I had a buddy that did that in a kayak with literally catching smallmouth.
That's awesome.
He pulled out that fly rod and started flipping that thing around, and all of a sudden he caught him.
We went out to the Susky for the local kayak. It's kayak anglers.
Yeah.
If you're familiar with them, they have their championship out there for every year.
Okay.
So all the different chapters went out there. You know, Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York, Indiana. Yeah. My son, who is a certified fly fishing guide.
Okay.
He went with me, and he was like, I'm just taking my fly rod. You guys go do your bass fishing. I'm taking my fly rod." Yeah. And he threw like streamers and zonkers all day long, and I mean, was just killing them. Yeah, just killing them. And I'm like, dude, you're killing me because I brought all my bass stuff. I didn't bring any of my fly rod stuff because I was fishing this tournament.
Yeah,
I was fishing the team event. So I'm like, I have to put fish on the board, and I was, but like to watch him, he's over, across the river from me.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing his rod just doubled over, and he's standing up. He's got a PA 14.
Yeah.
So he's standing up, and he's fighting this thing. And the whole time I'm more excited about watching him.
Yeah.
And watching the bend in his rod. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is great. And awesome. He'd catch it, hold it up, and you see like he'd have a big white streamer on there, a big white zonker. And I'm like, man, oh my gosh, this is incredible. Yeah, so it was a really good experience.
That's awesome. My buddy, he took his dad on a guided fly trip, upper part of one of these rivers around here, and he said the fly guide, like he hooked like a 21-inch smallmouth, like it was like 5 pounds, and the fly guide's like, oh my god, it's a smallmouth, and my buddy Michael's like, oh my god, this is a big smallmouth. Like he's like, he broke his PB smallmouth that day, but it was like on a streamer, like you said, like they were throwing streamers and just ripping the streamers. Mm-hmm. He said, a 5-pounder come up and smoked it, and he was like, the fly guide's just like, oh god, it's a smallmouth, and Michael's flipping out, but like that got my brain turning, like, oh. Like that's a whole thing I'm not even done yet. Like that's a whole thing I've not even attempted yet. Like, and that's one thing I actually asked this year with our kayak tournament series. I said, would a fly rod be allowed? And they were like, we've never been asked that question before, but we don't see why it wouldn't. It's like, it's rod and reel and artificial bait. As long as it's that, you're good. And I'm like, okay, that's all I needed to hear. Yep. So we're going to get after it. We're going to see. I think it's going to be fun. I be a lifelong learner. That's what I told my kids when I was a teacher, and that's what I keep saying now. I love to learn things, and so I'm excited about it.
Now you need to do what the guys around here do, dude. It's annoying, but it's fun to watch. They use a paddleboard and they fly fish off a paddleboard.
Oh, that's cool. Is that because it keeps the line from getting tangled up, right?
So basically, because you don't have to sit and you have that long rod, it's hard to do. While like being in a kayak, you can stand up, but you have more stability because those things are so much wider.
Yeah.
So they get the fishing paddle boards, which is basically a paddle board with almost like a walker handle in the front of it, so they can kind of lean against it and just work their fly rod. And like we have places around here because a lot of the lakes and streams and stuff here, they don't stock bass or anything in Vermont. It's all trout everywhere. So like, but there's a lot of places where obviously there's bass and so like I'll be a lot of times fishing for bass and I'll look and there's some dude out in the middle just going to town with his fly rod on a paddleboard. And it's like, I'm like, that's a smart way to do it though, because you can get pretty much anywhere you would want with that thing. And it's like I said, sometimes, like PJ was saying, sometimes it's almost annoying because I'll be out there like struggling with traditional bass baits, and this dude's out here with a fly rod just pulling smallmouth in.
I'll tell you, the thing about fly fishing that amazes me is dudes who saltwater fly fish. That is a whole. Listen, I have tangled into a big redfish. I could not imagine trying to even handle a redfish on a fly rod. Like, dude, I bet that is just a ride and a half. Like, that seems so much fun to me. That's just cool. And then like tarpon, like that didn't even make any sense. Like, it's like, obviously, they got they're bigger fly rods, but it still doesn't make any sense whatsoever. You could tangle with a tarpon with a fly rod. Like, that's awesome.
My buddy went down to Cuba from Canada. He's from Canada. He flew down to Cuba to try to tarpon fish and catch all the like barracuda and all that crap. He does YouTube, so
it was it was interesting. Yeah, so it's been many years ago. Bethany's parents got this really nice like house on this island, and we had to take like a ferry across to where this house was at for vacation. And so her dad was like, "Hey, I went over there and there's some fish over there in that canal. You need to go check it out." So I walk over there with a red-headed spook on a spinning rod, and I toss that thing out in the middle of there. I just go, and literally this tarpon comes up and goes, sucks this thing under, and I lean into it. And when I lean into it, dude, it goes, zit, 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 and I mean, he jumps straight up, slings it, and the spook flies one way, he flies the other. And I literally was just standing there. I was like, that is the coolest thing that I've ever seen. And I was like, that's all I needed. And I hooked that thing on there. I went and set it down. I was like, I'm not fishing the rest of the time we're here. I was like, that's it. That's all I needed right there. Like, that was awesome. Yeah.
It's funny how like that sound too, like the nostalgia of drag pull is like a sound that like if you like I always joke like I want to like almost record it on a phone and just walk into a trade show and just play it and just see how many people stop what they're doing to see what happened because that sound is so iconic for fishermen in general. Like
I love it. Yeah, dude, I love it, dude. I just love fishing, man. Like I tell people all the time, like you can say I love fishing. If it swims, it breathes through gills, I'm gonna try to catch it. Even carp. Like I want to try the carp thing. Like carp on a fly rod.
Yep.
That's a thing that I didn't even know was a thing. So you use
carp
like
on a fly rod, huh? That's crazy.
Yeah. So like you use like a I was talking to a guy, I don't know all the details, but he was kind of giving me a general gist of it. I don't know what they're called, but it's you'll know what I'm talking about. It's like a certain kind of fly that's like it kind of just looks like a bread ball. Like it
looks like a bayberry.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And so he said you get one of those and just throw it out there where carp are at. He said the carp will just come up, suck it under, and he said hook it and hold on. And I'm like, all right, we'll try that. That sounds fun.
Yeah, I'm actually going down. So Bobby from Jigs and Bigs has been trying to get me to like go down and fish with him because he's getting into carp fishing and stuff like that. And that's more of an overnight activity. So we do a lot of we do these you would actually honestly have fun with this too. Is we literally do these like basically parking lot camps where we just
that's cool.
Find a place to fish. Like the last time we did it, we just slept right in the boat ramp, which wasn't even legal because I don't think you're supposed to camp there at night. But we literally just went there, fished all day, pulled our kayaks up on shore, and then went and slept in our cars, and then went fishing in the morning.
That's fun.
And he wants to do that for carp fishing because that's more of an all night. They're more apt to eat at night. But I couldn't imagine the fly rod thing. That reminds me of like when I was on Lake Ontario up in the Salmon River one time. We went over the bridge in Pulaski, and there was a guy, and he had his both feet up on the front of this like 14-foot rowboat, and you could hear him giggling while driving by at 50 miles an hour because he had a king salmon on basically a bait caster, and he wasn't reeling. He was just leaning back and just letting this fish pull him upriver in this rowboat. And he was just hoping that it would tire itself out because I don't think he was prepared for what he had on. But you just heard him going like the whole time. And I'm like, that's fishing. That right there, that dude is having the time of his life because he hooked into a fish and it's literally pulling. And that's what's crazy about kayak fishing is like, I think that increases the level of fun because you're in their element with a kayak. Like I feel like you're more with them.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. No, you're automatic disadvantage. Like, dude, I'll tell you too, like I think that's what like appeals to me about like saltwater fishing too, is like everything's dangerous. Like everything is cut you, poke you, bite you, make you bleed some shape, form, or fashion or another. And like that was like, I made the grave mistake one time. We got on an awesome surf fishing bite. We're in Panama City, July 4th. So you can imagine how busy it was, right? But we would go out there at night and we'd wade out to like chest deep water and we're throwing jerk baits in the surf and catching ladyfish, king mackerel, Spanish mackerel. And like I grabbed a hold of a Spanish mackerel, not knowing that their tails were literally razor blades, and it cut the crap out of me. But that whole thing was just so cool because it was like that. It's like you're in their element. And I realized I was in their element when I'm reeling in a ladyfish and about a 5-foot bull shark came swimming up to take my ladyfish away from me. And I literally rod, reel, everything, dropped it, ran. Like like it was crazy because I'll never forget this. This is the stupidest shit I've ever done. So I'm out there. Well, one of the stupidest things I've ever done. So I'm out there and I'm fishing that jerkbait. And I go, whack. I'm like, here's one. This ladyfish is jumping. It's jumping. It gets next to me. And I'm trying to get it unhooked. And it's bleeding bad. Like it's bleeding real bad. And so I finally get it unhooked. It swims off. I throw back out there and I hook another one. It's just like this cloud of blood hanging around me. Well, in that moment, my dumb ass should have went, you know what?
I've seen Jaws. Yeah.
Don't stand right there. So I'm reeling this next ladyfish in. And I mean, boys, when I say here he came, he come up out like the ladyfish jumps and the shark comes up behind it. And I watch its mouth open like something out of National Geographic. It comes up and like, ooh, it rolls down. And I'm like, and it's probably from 10 feet away from me. I was like, no bueno, son. I threw the rod that way, and I looked over at my father-in-law. I said, shark! And here I went, man. I was high-stepping trying to get out of that water. And, I mean, dude, that shark, I think he ended up getting that ladyfish. And I don't know what happened to my rod and reel. I left it because there was a ladyfish attached to it, and there was a head that, I'm not kidding you, was probably 3.5 foot wide trying to eat it. And I was just like, I'm not doing this. Like, I'm not going to get my ass ate today. Like, this is not the day for that. And I think that's what I love about like saltwater fishing is like, you're in their element and everything there wants to hurt you in some. The only thing I've ever grabbed a hold of that didn't want to hurt me was a redfish, but everything else wanted to hurt me in some shape, form, or fashion.
What?
He says, hello.
Yeah, my wife's working tonight, so I'm on dog duty, so
I love it.
They're like that dog is like a sentry dog, so she does a lap. So every hour she comes up to check on me. Like she needs to know what's going on every hour. So that's actually, to be honestly, bring it back to the other topic about loving fishing. That's the other thing is like sometimes it's not the fishing, it's the shark that you saw, or it's like for me, I had the story I always tell is like I went to this lake, it was Trout Lake. And I was fishing there's a lot of bass in this lake and they eat the trout. So they're fairly big bass and there's a lot of them. And I was following the swirls, like the actual bait school of trout, following those around thinking I could fish behind them to try to get the bass that was eating on them.
Yeah.
Not looking up, not looking around, just looking at the water, watching that ripple of water going from spot to spot, chasing these bait pods. And all of a sudden I felt wind on my face and I look up. And there's a fucking bald eagle, National Geographic style, like claws, coming down to the water to take one of those trout. And I'm in a kayak, so I feel its wind from the wings as it comes down, claws that fish, and heads out. And I'm like, I had no idea the eagles were even there. I didn't know there was eagles there. I had no idea. Apparently, this is a thing that happens every morning. They literally put benches because there's a state park across the road. They put benches for people at the park to come watch the eagles eat. And I had no idea it was a thing until I was face to face with a bald eagle trying to get its meal. And I'm like,
oh yeah.
And you don't realize how big those things are until you're that close to those things.
Oh, everybody.
They don't look that big. And then you see them like,
everybody's like, oh, bald eagle. It's not that big. The hell. That is a bird.
Its wingspan is me. Like, it was like, I'm like, whoa.
Yeah.
I'm like, if that thing wanted to kill me, I'm dead.
We've got a bunch around here. Like I've actually got one that visits my house every now and again. So
Oh, really?
I'm fairly close to Norris Lake, probably about 10 minutes from me, the closest point. I mean, Norris is huge. So, I mean, there's places I can drive an hour and a half and still hit Norris, but the closest point's about 10 minutes from me. And so for a eagle, it's nothing. Then plus all the rivers and creeks that run through here. But every now and again, I'll hear him up in the woods, and he'll be up in the woods, just chilling. And like, you'll see his bald head sitting, and he man, they're cool birds. They're just such cool birds. I love them. I actually got to watch one time. Me and my dad did this. It was on Cherokee Lake. We got to watch a set breed. And so I don't know if you've ever
Really?
watched them. So they do this thing called a death fall. It's in like, so they'll go up 20, 30, 50, 60 feet in the air, and they lock claws, and they literally just free fall and drop and like spiral all the way down. And right before they hit the ground or the water, they'll split apart and fly back up and meet again in the air and then start falling. And we sat for 45 minutes one day and just watched these eagles. I mean, because like it started and it was like, first it was like 10 feet, and then it was like 20. And then by the end of it, I mean, they would fly up 150 feet in the air, and like they would lock claws, and here they'd come, and you'd literally hear them falling. Like it'd be like, and right before they hit, they like that and fly up, and just screaming and chirping and going on like. And they make this weird noise like I'd never heard of. Normally it's like that, they do that chirping thing. Like they were doing this like it was like a hiss and like a growl. And it was so cool, man. It was one of the coolest things I ever got to experience, to sit there and watch them eagles do that. Like it's so
weird
cool.
when you see birds growl. I'm not gonna lie. It's like the Canadian geese will do that up here.
Oh yeah.
If you get too close to them, they'll like literally hiss at you. I'm sure they probably seen that in Michigan, but yeah, like they literally like they'll. And we have the only thing I've ever seen mate is freaking snapping turtles.
Oh yeah,
which are aggressive. Like we have like manhole cover size ones in the lake that I fish.
Yeah,
and I thought it was like injured because it was just floating there, and I was like, "What the hell?" And I came up on it. I actually have a video on it where it got. I basically cock blocked a turtle.
Good job, man.
I had no idea what was going on, and I was like, what the hell? Because I saw it floating, and I was like, I wonder if a boat hit it, if it was injured. So I go over to it in my boat, and I'm like right up close to it. And of course, I'm a YouTuber, so I have a camera out, and I'm trying to get the angle, and I'm like, look at this thing. It's a turtle. And I'm like, oh, there's two of them. And then it separated, and that turtle, I know which one was the male because he looked at my boat, and he started chasing my boat.
It's hilarious.
And he tried to get, like, he got his claws on the back of my boat, and I'm on my trolling motor, like doing a complete circle to keep this like snapping turtle from coming in to yell at me about the fact that I just cock blocked it.
That's hilarious. The best thing I ever did with a snapping turtle is I stepped on one thinking it was a rock in a river, and it literally it slung me off my feet. Like I stepped on his back, and I'm standing there like on it, and don't realize it's a snapping turtle. And man, when he decided he wanted to move, old boy just moved. Like you don't realize how strong them dudes are. I mean, he was the same way. He was probably, not huge, but a good size one. And I'm standing there talking to John, and I mean, all of a sudden, it was like somebody grabbed my foot, and jerked it up from underneath me. That turtle just started walking, and he like picked himself up and just started walking. There went my foot.
Yeah, I'm done. I'm done with you. Yeah.
Yeah, it was crazy. I was like, dang, that's a powerful animal.
They're actually like a lucky thing for me. Like my wife will ask me, like I'll say I haven't been catching fish today, and she'll be like, did you see any turtles yet? Because like for some reason, when I see them, I start catching. I don't know if it's like a bait fish thing or what, but like it's like a weird thing. But like the other thing is they'll scare the shit out of you because they're stealthy as hell.
Yeah,
like you'll be sitting in your kayak and the way they surface. You ever seen them like actually just like surface?
Mm-hmm.
They just pop up. Mm-hmm. Like it's like they stop keeping themselves down, but they just and you're just like, oh shit. Like I've got a lot of videos where I'm like casting and I like literally was like, oh yeah, so what we're doing today is holy shit, and there's like a turtle right there because I had no idea it was sneaking up on me.
I tell you what'll scare the absolute dog crap out of you is a beaver at night.
Knew that was coming. Yep.
Yeah, I have many a time been pedaling in a kayak tournament before dawn, and a beaver decide, hey, I'm going to scare the piss out of this guy and slap its tail, and literally you come out of your skin trying to get away from it. Yeah, this beaver is funny.
I had a beaver one time jump off a bank because I was too close to its den.
Oh,
it was up chewing on wood and stuff, and he flew. All I could think of is like the freaking flying squirrel cartoon. I can't remember who it was, but like like he literally would like I was just fishing, and I was like, I was actually talking on the video, and I was like, what the fuck was that?
Yeah.
Because I heard it hit the water, and then all of a sudden I heard, and I looked, and there was a tail next to me, and he kept circling me and slapping that tail like I, of course, was being stupid, but I was like, yeah, I should probably leave because he's clearly telling me to go.
Yeah, beavers are bigger than you think they are too. That's one thing. It's like a lab. It's like a Labrador. Like you see one, and you think, oh, it's a beaver, and then you get up next one, you're like, damn, that's a beaver.
Yeah, because you usually only see the little bit of their face coming across the water, and you're like, oh, and then you see the whole thing, and you're like, oh, that probably could hurt me.
That's an. I'll tell you, the scariest though I've ever been, scaredest I've ever been in the woods. I was deer hunting. Y'all ever heard bobcats going at it? Mm-hmm. Boys, let me tell you, first time I ever heard it, I thought, this is it. I'm going to die Blair Witchcraft style right now. So I'm walking out of the woods and they start that and screaming like a woman, like a woman being beaten, and I'm like, I called my dad and I was like, Dad, I'm going to die out here. And he's like, what is it? I'm like, it sounds like a woman is being beaten. And he's like, it's a bobcat, son. And I'm like, the hell it is. I was like, a bobcat don't make that damn noise. I was like, bobcats purr or some shit. I was like, I don't know what. Yeah, dude, that was the freakiest thing. Is two bobcats went at it. And they get that back and forth going. It sounds like talking almost. And it's just like, yeah.
I had that with coy dogs. So up here, what's happening is, Fish and Game denies it, but I've had proof of it, is the timber wolves from Canada are coming across and they're breeding with our coy dogs. So you've got these inbred coyotes that were already not smart to begin with, and now they're getting the size of a timber wolf and they hunt in packs. So back when I was a kid, you used to you saw a coy dog and you went, they were gone. They were terrified. Now they'll stop about face and come at you. And I was in my tree stand, and I heard them, you hear that sound all over the place. Yeah. And it was just about dark, and I ended up I literally text my dad, and I'm like, you're going to have to leave without me, because I'm not coming out of this tree, because it's dark. They can see me, and I can't see them. And I'm like, there's no way in hell I'm getting out of this tree. So I ended up just staying in there. But
yeah, there's a few things like wolves freak me out a little bit. Like gray wolves, like a pack of wolves. Yeah. I've never seen a pack of wolves, but but the thing that a lot of is it literally a living nightmare is a grizzly bear. That there is to me, people are like, monsters aren't real, and I'm like, yes they are. They're called grizzly bears, and there is nothing, I don't care what a person thinks. I don't care how strong you think you are, how badass you think you are. If a grizzly bear gets a hold of you, you are done.
And where are you going to go? And that's the thing. Where are you going to hide? You can't climb a tree. You can't outrun it. You're done. There's no recourse for that.
Yeah, those, I don't know, dude. Grizzly bears are just something, dude. They are. I got to see.
And the thing about bears is they're stealthy as hell.
Oh, that's the
weird. As big as they are, is they're we don't have grizzlies here, but we have black bears, and
they'll sneak right up on you. Well, black bears.
I've seen.
You're kind of dumb. Black bears kind of fumble around, they are kind of funny, because down here, dude, it'll sound like somebody's falling through the woods, and here'll come a black bear down a hill, just hey guys, what's going on? I tell you, the weird one for me was an elk. So the first time I ever saw an elk in the wild, dude, he walked right up on me, you would think something with swords on its head couldn't be very stealthy in the woods, but he was there or he wasn't there. And then all of a sudden there stands a horse-sized creature with two, 8-foot swords on its head. And you're like, oh, how you doing? And
moose are like that.
And they're huge, man. Oh, a moose is, I tell people, until you see a moose, that's prehistoric. That's Ice Age size animal. Like an elk. I thought elk's big. Moose is a whole nother level of animal. It's like the Ice Age. I
had a buddy wreck a car. So he had a Geo Metro, and he wrecked it because he drove under the moose, and the moose fell onto his hood.
God, yeah.
That's to give you a perspective on moose size. The dude was able to drive a car under it before it fell on top of him.
Yeah.
Because it stepped out in front of him. That's how I saw it. The funniest thing I saw was I went to college in a mountain town, and I went on the way up.
Yeah.
there was a guy, and he had like all kinds of like rope and gear, and he had a moose in his yard.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, he's hanging it. I came back, and his deck was in a pile of lumber in his front yard because he tried to stringer up that moose off of his front deck and ripped it clean off his house. And his deck was now a pile of lumber because he didn't take into account that he was hanging 1,000-pound animal off of his deck.
It's crazy. That's crazy.
And that's just how it is. But up here, being from the Northeast, we see them, so it's like you don't think about it. But
Yeah. It's crazy.
all right, guys. So we're going on like an hour and 20, and like Alex, as I said earlier, Alex is a YouTuber, so I'm sure he's probably got 5 more hours of videos to edit before he gets to go to bed and make more videos tomorrow. So
Yeah, I got a video to edit from today. It's going to be a fun one to say the least. It is a cast and blast, if you will. You just have to watch and see what happens. Let's just put it that way. There is a shotgun discharged at one point in the video, and it's going to be fun, to say the least. Yeah, we're not a hunting channel by any means, but I do love shooting shit with a shotgun. So just you have to tune in and see what happens. It's going to be good.
yeah, go watch that video. You won't miss it. Even if you don't subscribe to my channel, hit his channel because it's worth watching. Trust me. So
Appreciate you. I
but yeah,
appreciate
we're gonna end this, guys. We'll have Alex back for sure. Alex loves podcasts, and he's always a message away. So don't worry about that. We'll definitely have him back. But gonna end the video right here, guys. And thank you for coming along. And as always, let's get out there and catch more fish.
Bye.
I don't know why I use that tagline, but